Good day, everybody, and welcome to Port Perspectives. I'm Captain Jeff Monroe. I'm the Director of Education Programs for the International Association of Maritime and Port Executives. And this is part of our ongoing series of speaking with senior executives who have been very successful in the industry to kind of give some insights to the next generation of young people coming up in the industry and hopefully someday be sitting in some of these seats. I'm very honored and pleased today to be talking with Bethann Rooney, who is the Port Director for the Port Authority of the New York and New Jersey. And it's wonderful. We've known each other for a great long time. And a disclaimer, she is on our Board of Advisors for the IAMPE, but that's not why we talk to her. It's because she's been a really successful and wonderful and nice to have a woman in this position as well. So tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
I agree. Well, first off, Jeff, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's real exciting that, you are doing these podcasts, really in a way that will reach young people today and encourage them to get into the industry. So, when I started and I kind of fell into the industry by learning about New York Maritime College when I was a senior in high school, but I had already decided to go to an all-women's Catholic college to study accounting. Crazy.
Little bit of a change
from what I ultimately wound up doing, but it wasn't until March of my senior year of high school where I even learned about the maritime industry, and I fell in love with the concept of going to sea, on a ship during college, and then ultimately getting paid to do it. And I had no maritime experience in my family. We didn't even go to the beach as a kid, but I really just loved the idea of traveling around the world on a ship. So I quickly pivoted and enrolled at New York Maritime. Thankfully was accepted with very, very little notice before we had to show up at indoctrination. And I have not a single regret since the day I first stepped on campus. I've had just a tremendous career that I, still am in the height of, and really looking forward to continue to serve now in this capacity as director. And then maybe someday, be a consultant like you, and
not a consultant and an advisor,
the IAMPE,
which would be wonderful. So, and you were one of my brighter students in class.
Well, I was a student. I was not bright.
Well, I don't know.
So listen, my philosophy in college, because I'm not book smart in any way, shape, or form. I struggled, quite a bit through education. For me, D meant done, and I just needed to get through the courses. But what worked for me at Maritime College was so many of the courses were tactile. They were hands-on learning, learning celestial navigation and how to find your place in this world, by looking at the sun or the moon or the stars. I was able to excel at that. I barely got by in all of the basic academic courses because I struggled with them so much. But what paid off for me in college has paid off for me in my professional life, and that's hard work. So I wasn't the best, I wasn't the top of the class, but I worked hard and I committed to everything that I was doing.
And that's what made you a good student. I think the fact that you were committed and you worked hard in all of that. And now you're leading one of the largest ports in the United States, which is wonderful. And for a short period of time, the largest tonnage port. I'm sure LA Long Beach is going to want to take that title back, but you have 15 million consumers here and a very, very active port, a lot of activities going on here, which is wonderful. Tell us about some of the things that are going on right now in the Port of New York and New Jersey.
Well, I'm just gonna correct you a little bit on the numbers of consumers, because we serve 46 million people within a 4-hour truck trip. And beyond the truck trip, because we're predominantly a truck port, meaning that most of the cargo, most of the containers that come into the Port of New York and New Jersey leave here by truck and they go within the local area. 46 million people are within 4 hours of the Port of New York and New Jersey are dependent upon our port facilities for 95% of consumer goods. Beyond that, another 120 million people who we access on longer haul trucks and rail access. So 1/3 of the nation's GDP, 1/3 is dependent upon the Port of New York and New Jersey. So the role that we play, and yes, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles and the Port of New York and New Jersey, you know, we're always talking about who's number one, who's number two, who's number three. It doesn't matter, you know, what those rankings are. The fact of the matter is that combined, you know, we are, you know, inseparable in terms of the value that we provide to the national economy. And that goes just as much to the ports of Savannah and Boston and Baltimore and Houston and beyond.
You're really focused on improvements here in the port. I know you've been dealing with issues like, you know, climate change, seawater, sea level rise, and all the rest. What's some of the big projects that you have going on right now?
Yeah, so right now we're focused on some of the core infrastructure that serves the port. So you may have seen when you came in this afternoon, we've got a large roadway reconfiguration effort going on. The roadways here on the north end of the Port Newark Elizabeth complex were built in World War I. And they were not designed for the capacity that we need to service the port, and they weren't designed for trucks as large as they are. So we're in the process of completely rebuilding what we call the Port Street corridor on the north side of the facility. At the same time, we're working now to design an enhancement to our express rail facility. The express rail facilities, we've got now 4 on-dock rail facilities in the Port of New York and New Jersey, the first port in the country to have on-dock rail. So with our 4 facilities, we've got the capacity to move 1.5 million containers per year. We're doing just about 1/3 of that now. So we have the capacity to grow, and we're able to reach New England, the Midwest, and Eastern Canada. But right now, all of our trains come out of our facilities and make a right and go to the north. So we're in the process of designing something called the southbound connector, so that the trains coming out of our largest facility, Millennium Marine Rail or Express Rail Elizabeth, can come out of the terminal and go to the south, make a left. And then that will free up capacity on the northern end of the port, which will provide for fluidity as well and for efficiency in handling the cranes. On the other side, on the water side of the harbor or of the port, we just recently got authorization from the Army Corps of Engineers to go to 55 feet. So, as you know, we completed the 50-foot deepening project in 2016. We completed the raising of the Bayonne Bridge in 2019.
Joe and I remember that one. Yes,
Yeah,
I was involved in that quite a bit.
You do. And before both of those projects were even completed, the ships that were calling the Port of New York and New Jersey had already exceeded the design of the 50-foot channel. So the channel was designed for the Regina Maersk, if you can remember her. 6,400 TEUs.
We used to think that was the largest ship we were ever going to see.
Well, and that's the problem, Jeff, is that was the largest ship that we were ever going to see. So we designed the harbor to accommodate the Regina Maersk, and then lo and behold, before the construction is completed, ships have surpassed the size of the Regina Maersk 2 and 3 times as large. So right now we're in the design and engineering phase with the Army Corps of Engineers for a 55-foot deepening project that has been authorized by Congress. So we're excited to get that started as well.
So tell me, how do you use strategic planning to sort of figure out what direction you're going to take and how you're going to get there?
Yeah, so strategic planning really is the cornerstone of everything that we do. And the baseline of that planning comes with understanding the market and understanding, first and foremost, who's using the Port of New York and New Jersey, why are they using the Port of New York and New Jersey, and how are a whole bunch of microeconomic trends going to impact the volume of cargo, you know, coming through the port. So when we finished our current strategic plan, which we call Port Master Plan 2050, we completed it in June of 2019. And based on all those microeconomic trends and the capacity of the ecosystem in and around the Port of New York and New Jersey, the expectation is that we're going to double, if not triple, our cargo volume between now and 2050. Not just containers, but the number of passengers that are moving through our cruise terminals, the number of automobiles that are coming through our auto terminals, as well as the bulk commodities, things like road salt and orange juice and edible oils, all expected to continue to grow, to serve that 1/3 of the nation's GDP that is dependent upon our facilities.
I think in the long run, it's been interesting how well you all got away, after Sandy came, how well quickly you came back into play, got everything in place. And I remember the briefing that you gave to the Secretary of Homeland Security. And I still use many of your points in my training program and talk about some of the things that you talked about, but you really recovered fairly quickly. And as a result of that, you were able to get back on the ground very quickly as well. So how are you looking at putting that into your planning for the future?
So crisis management, I hate to say it, is something that the Port of New York and New Jersey does really well, right? So it's not the thing that you ever want to have to use, but when the time comes, you have to be good at it. And the baseline of being able to handle the crisis is having the relationships. And the relationships that we have in the Port of New York and New Jersey between the Port Authority and our federal, state and local partners, between the Port Authority and industry stakeholders, I think is uncomparable to any other port in the country. You had Rick Larrabee on, a couple of weeks ago, and, Rick was really, our incident manager for the recovery from Hurricane Sandy. And I came into the facility that day with him at about 4:00 in the morning after the water had receded, and it looked like Armageddon. And we thought it was going to be weeks before we were able to get the port back up and operating again. It was back up and operating in 4.5 days. And that was, due in total to the men and women of the Port of New York and New Jersey, including the ILA labor, who worked tirelessly because they knew how important it was that ecosystem be able to get restarted again.
Yeah, it seemed that it was very quick. And then one thing I found was very interesting was some of the comments and the points that you had made, including, how do we prepare our infrastructure for the next incident when it does come? And you said, you can try to anticipate everything, but you can't plan for everything, so you do the very best you can and all of that.
It's all about risk management. So whether we're talking about a Hurricane Sandy 100-year type storm, or we're talking about a terrorist attack, or as we tragically experienced here in the port in July, a fire that took the lives of 2 local firefighters, you can't be 100% of the time. So, it's about managing your risk, and it's about being prepared for those. And you have to accept some level of risk. And that's where I think the resiliency comes into play. So the perfect example, I think, when it comes to things like stormwater rise and the 100-year storm, is we cannot raise the elevation of the port complex. We looked at it, but it would require that the entire complex, 3,000 acres, get raised upwards of 12 feet. But that's only as good as us being able to connect with the local road and rail network afterwards. So it's impossible to do that. So what else do you do? So now we have plans and protocols in place where we've protected critical infrastructure around the port. We have elevated that critical infrastructure, substations, generators, communication hubs, and the like. And then we've put in layered procedures about taking things out and moving it to high ground that can be. So, for example, traffic light controllers. During Hurricane Sandy, they were in the traffic lights and they were completely inundated. So we weren't able to get back up and operating with traffic management systems until we could clean and bake and dry and replace those. Same things happened with our ship-to-shore cranes. So now that ship-to-shore cranes in ports all over the country have gone to electric from diesel, we're now dependent upon electric motors. And electric motors and salt water, don't combine very well. So, but now the terminal operators have plans in a 100-year storm type scenario, take those motors out, bring them to high ground so that we can get back up and operating quickly.
Yeah, I noticed when I was down in San Juan and also down in Gulfport, that the folks that ran those terminals and everything, they put the motors up on the higher level, right? And had geared mechanisms that came down to operate the wheels and everything like that. So I think everybody's thinking in that direction and stuff, and spending, you know, a fair amount of money trying to accommodate that to the best they can and stuff. How do you empower your people? You know, I know this is it's a fairly, you know, changed staff. You know, a lot of my generation of people have, you know, decided to either retire or gone to that great terminal in the sky. We hope it's in the sky, right? But how do you empower your people, you know, to make the right decisions, you know, when they're confronted with a crisis?
Yeah. So I think it's one, you know, giving them the opportunity right from the very beginning, you know, to become, you know, responsible, to take ownership of projects, to be able to fail, and to fail and know that I've got their back, and we'll get through, you know, those failures together. You know, it's about giving people the opportunity, which I was given several times in my career in the Port Authority, to work outside of my comfort zone, to take on projects and initiatives that weren't within, you know, my scope of work. And it builds them, you know, up, gives them a broader depth and breadth of experience, so that they can grow, and they can grow into leadership positions. If I hadn't been given the opportunities and worked with tremendous mentors like Lillian Barone and Rick Larrabee, who saw in me more than what I saw in myself, and saw in me the opportunity to be something more than what I was at each stage in my career, I wouldn't be where I am. So I've had the gift. It truly has been a blessing to be able to learn how to lead from some of the best.
And you pass it on to the next generation.
And I pass it on to the next generation.
I always find it was interesting as undergraduates, you know, you always wonder, you see all those young faces like yours when you were in the classes and stuff. And I remember when we were talking with Griff Lynch one time, he sat in on one of my classes, just a couple sessions, and he says, it brings back memories of those scary days, you know. But you always thought to yourself, you wonder what the future for the young people are going to be. And the one thing I always found about Maritime College, it teaches you to be resourceful, right? And it's about, you know, we got a challenge, we're going to take it on, we're going to overcome it, right. You know, somehow or the other, you know, we're going to be successful. It's evident by the number of people from Fort Schuyler and several other schools have done very, very well.
Yeah, and I think it all comes from that concept where we're fundamentally trained about, you know, becoming officers on a ship. And when you're out there, you know, sailing the oceans, you are completely dependent upon yourself and your shipmates for survival, right? So you have to be creative, you have to be innovative, you know, you have to have this grit that to survive, literally and figuratively, that you don't necessarily have when you are studying in other areas, or you're getting into other careers. I think the nature of what we're trained for just makes us just a different type of individual. And the same can be said for Coast Guard Academy, you know, graduates, and Naval Academy graduates, right? You're on your own in the middle of the ocean. When you know what hits the fan, you know, you got to fix it. You got to put out the fire. You got to fix the engine failure. You got to plug a hole, you know, in the hull. And I can remember going to, you know, firefighting class and, you know, salvage, you know, class, and, you know, you're plugging holes with, you know, any dustpan, rag, you know, paintbrush, classmate that you can, you know, because if you don't, you know, the ship is at risk.
You know, I hear a lot of times from various folks that this younger generation that's coming up, they're very complacent, you know, they're more concerned about, well, it's 5 o'clock, I gotta get home, and, you know, something along those lines. Are you finding that?
There is definitely something about, you know, the younger generation, but I think port authorities are, you know, again, a little bit of a different beast, because you have to want to be a public servant. And I think in wanting to be a public servant, because none of us in port authorities are doing this for the money. Right?
Good point.
So, but serving a higher purpose, right? And in my case, serving the people of the states of New York and New Jersey, and really helping them with things that they take for granted every single day. There's a higher purpose to that. So I think when young folks join the Port Authority, they're a little bit different than, the other generation, part of that generation that's a little more complacent. But we do struggle with people who don't want to come to an office, and work. So when you're operating, port facilities and, folks want to be home, working and not working from the office, that becomes a little challenging.
Well, it is. And it's, it's also trying to create a culture, where people come in and they feel like, this is, if I'm going to work here, this is what I need to be like. This is how I need to rise to the occasion.
And you have to be part of the team. So I feel very strongly, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey requires our staff to be in the office 3 days a week. I require everybody in the port department to be in the office on Wednesday. That's our anchor day. And the amount of work that happens on Wednesdays, the amount of collegiality, and team members and just being part of a bigger purpose. All comes out, I think, on Wednesdays more than it does on any other day. There's something to be said for being together in the same place and having that hallway conversation and having that conversation in the head. There's just nothing better.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, honestly, I always miss the social context when I left the port and the airport up in Maine, and of course, we had a tight-knit group of people and stuff like that. And I always recognized that they said that, you get to be friends with people, even though you're sort of guiding them and leading them. And we used to find that was interesting is that they were the ones that had the greater energy. They had the greater experience. In many cases, they had the greater intelligence in regards to what they wanted to get accomplished.
Right.
And by empowering them and giving and creating a culture, which, you take a chance and you may fail, but we're always going to back you. I think that really made a big difference.
Yeah.
We got so much done in Portland. We got so much done in Massachusetts too, in Boston, which surprised a lot of people because everybody kind of looks at public agencies like, oh, you can't go to work anywhere else, so you're going to work for a public agency. But it's very different in this world.
It is very different. And I can't tell you, I am 99% of the time not the smartest person in the room, right? I can't tell you how many times a day that I say to the team, this far better than I do. This is not my area of expertise. I don't know what the right way, to do this is. But But again, by empowering them, right, they have the ability, to share that information. And then collectively, we make decisions. So, ultimately the decision, rests with me, but it's coming from the ground up, or at least that's what I strive to, right? It comes from the ground up. I'm not the expert, in an awful lot of things that we need to deal with as port directors. So I let, the people shine from
one thing, a friend of mine, Peter Vigu, who was head of Chitbro Corporation for many years, Maine Maritime grad, and he had a sign in the conference room that we shared with them and said, no one in the room here is smarter than all of us together, and it was an amazing philosophy in getting to the aspect that we listen to each other, we digest what each other has to say. Nobody commands the circumstance, but somebody's got to have their hands on the tiller, and that's the role of good leadership.
Right. And I'll make the decisions, and I need to get a copy of that sign because, that's exactly, what it is. And that's why I also think it's important to be able to put people in a room together, and have conversations and workshop things. It's not the same when you're doing it on Zoom or Teams or, WebEx and things like that. I often, tell the younger staff, get a seat at the table, don't sit in the background, don't sit in the bleacher seats, because when you're in the bleacher seats, you're not as likely to participate actively in the conversation. So get a seat at the table. You can't do that when you're on a Zoom or a WebEx, type meeting. It's always hard to, break in. You don't want to step on someone else's toes. If you use the raise your hand feature, you're dependent upon the moderator seeing it and actually calling on you. It's just not the same. get in the room and get a seat at the table.
Yeah, we discovered that when we were teaching, on Zoom during COVID. And it's not anywhere near as effective as being in the room, with everybody in place. And that always makes a big difference. And you've been reaching out to the younger generation. You're hoping to cultivate younger children who are now, in junior high school and stuff, and saying, this might be a potentially great career for you.
Yeah. I shared my experience that I just happened to meet, cadets and, fell in love with this concept. But that changed my world. That changed everything about me. So it was really about being able to provide other people that opportunity. And people drive up and down the New Jersey Turnpike every day, and they give absolutely no consideration to what's going on in the port. And that happens in ports all over the country, all over the world. You take for granted what the ports do. You go to the gas station and there's gas. You go to the grocery store and there's food. You go to Walmart and there's everything it is that you want, but you don't give any consideration to the ship that brought it there, right? And so we're in the heart of that ecosystem that everybody is dependent upon. So part of our workforce development program is really about community outreach and making sure that the local communities that are just outside our gates understand what goes on inside here. And not only understanding what goes on inside here by providing them, briefings, providing them tours, bringing them down here to check it out. We've been part of developing curriculum with local high school in transportation, distribution, and logistics. We've helped develop curriculum with, mechanics who could, then work on the automobile, imports. But we have to open the doors and let people see what goes on here, and then tell them all the vast amount of careers that are available. Those that you need a college education for, but there's so many more that you don't need a college education for. So, the local community doesn't necessarily have all the same opportunities, but we need to tell them what opportunities that they do have available to them. And Hillary McCarran, who's part of my team, just does an incredible job reaching out to the local communities, setting up programming with high schools, with junior colleges, with technical colleges and training programs. And we're introducing young people to jobs, whether it be as a longshoreman or in logistics and distribution, or driving a truck, or being a tugboat captain.
Yeah.
We just recently had a workshop where, we brought people, together with the tug and barge community, about the opportunities that are available, whether it's a cook, on board a ship, or, an AB or a deckhand. You got to start somewhere. And, we're showing people what all those opportunities are.
Well, the interesting thing, this entire program began at Fort Schuyler, because they used to teach the port program as an elective. And it was because of the efforts that working with Lillian Barone and the late Alan Longshine, who, when I showed up and said, we want to teach a course in port stuff, of course, Alan at the time, he had been a graduate of Fort Schuyler. And he talked to Lillian and said, we have a whole cadre of wonderful people coming in. So this is where we began to teach this. And it was because of that interface between the Port Authority, and Fort Schuyler, when I was still a professor there. So with all the young people who are now going to be looking at this with great enthusiasm, what advice would you give them as they start to think for the future, right? And where to set their sights, maybe?
Yeah, so, for young people who are considering, what their career might be in the future, what I can say is that the maritime industry provides such a vast array of opportunities where you could be going, to sea on a ship, or, you could be working, with a port authority or a terminal operator, what have you. It's really hard to explain to someone everything that the maritime industry, provides to you. For those younger, little bit older people who are in the academies now and, and graduating soon and, just starting out in their careers, perhaps, I think the best advice that I could give them is get out of your silo, or get out of your box. And, particularly with a lot of the younger generation today, they're super focused on, it's not my job, not my job, right? But as we said on the ship, there are clearing lines of demarcation, but when something bad goes wrong, everybody's got to step up to the plate. So for young people that are starting out, set your horizons on the things that need to be done, but don't necessarily fit in your job description or anybody else's, because they still need to get done. And then that provides you the opportunity to continue to learn, to continue to grow, to continue to showcase, what it is that you can do and how resilient you are. Rick Larrabee talked about, me coming in the day after 9/11 and say, what can I do? I knew absolutely nothing about maritime security or terrorism or weapons of mass destruction. I had to look it up. But that set me on a path because I was ready to say, yes, sir, I'm here. I'm ready to help. What can I do? And my entire trajectory changed by being willing to take the risk, by being vulnerable. I felt for the first 6 months that I was going to fail miserably at this job and that other people's lives were going to be dependent upon my failure. And so it took me a while to, get over that and to, build the confidence, but I was willing to take the risk, and mentors were willing to take the risk on me, but they wouldn't have taken the risk if I wasn't continuously showing people along the way that I was willing to take on and try anything that they could hand me.
Yeah, I remember when my daughter came to me, she was working in a bank at the time. She was in a local college up there. And she says, hey, Pop, what would you think of me going to sea? Right. Of course, she went all the way through captain and everything. And I was very proud of her. And I often found to myself, you know what? She to me is an example of the fact that, when you're innovative, when you think about things, when you think outside the box, that there are no limitations.
No limitations.
And that you never know where you might be. An old ship driver like me wound up a professor, wound up leading 2 ports and stuff like that, and now I'm a media personality.
Yeah, and to the young people, that are in high school, I mentioned before, D meant done, and I'm serious about my grades. I was not a good student, but I worked hard. And it's not about being at the top of the class. It's not about being the star football player or the star musician. It's about how much effort you put in and how much passion for the subject that you're working on or you're working in, that you develop. If you're not passionate about any career that you decide to get into, it's going to be miserable for you and everybody else around you. So you got to be passionate about what it is that you're doing. So I'm not the smartest person, but I'm a damn hard worker and I'm extremely passionate about what I do.
I think that makes the difference in the world. I'll be honest with you, just between you and I wasn't a good student either. So
I think you told us that a couple times in class.
did I really? Yeah. I was always trying to encourage the anchorman, so. Well, Beth, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate your time and I appreciate you talking with us and talking with everybody who'll be watching this program and stuff like that. And hopefully it'll be a great inspiration that, we are an industry that's changing age. My generation is quickly disappearing.
Yeah.
Your generation is at the helm, and the next generation is getting ready to take the stirrups. So, the reality in all of this is that I think if we can be encouraging, if we can be helpful, if we can serve as mentors, and if people can understand that they live in a culture where if they think outside the box, it's going to work. And I think that's great. So
completely agree.
Thank you so much. Always a joy to see you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff, so much for the opportunity. It's awesome. I know we talked for a half hour. I could talk for, another 8 hours to you.
No, that's all right. And we always enjoy that. Look forward to next meeting. And I thank you for all the guidance that you've given us on the advisory board. For the IAMPE, it's been wonderful. So we're very lucky to have a great group of talented people, including Rick Larrabee and yourself and many others, who are on the board who guide what we do in the program and stuff. And, we've got a lot of alumni now, and it's the only worldwide certification. And I'm looking forward to the programs that we'll be doing the rest of this year and into next year. And, getting into our first Spanish program, our first Australian program. We've already completed our Canadian and island programs, and so it'll be great. And of course, like yourself,
When I retire,
when you,
when I retire.
sounds
But-
like a winner.
Yeah, I mean, I think the importance of the program really can't be understated, because most of the people working in the industry did not go to one of the maritime colleges, right? So they stumbled into the industry as accountants or lawyers or engineers or project managers or real estate people, right? And now they find themselves in the maritime industry, but they have no idea, how this all operates. So the value, I've got, 10 people taking the class, starting tomorrow, and, none of them has a maritime background. So it's super important to, begin to train and educate, those that are just getting into the industry and didn't have the benefit of going to one of the colleges.
Well, I could not have asked for a stronger endorsement.
So,
And thank you for all of your support of our programs. Well, we
thank
want to thank Beth and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey for hosting this wonderful program. It's amazing how much traffic I ran into, but that's a good sign. So thank you so much for everything, and we'll look forward to continuing to work with you in the future.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Have a great day, everybody. We'll look forward to our next Port Perspectives coming up soon.